There comes a moment when everything you thought was the problem, every delay, every failure, every moment you felt stuck, starts to look different. Not because the situation changes overnight, but because something finally clicks deep within. The chase stops making sense. The strategies feel heavy, and even though you may have been doing everything right, you realize that none of it is moving the needle. And then, the truth hits. It was never the outer world that was blocking the breakthrough. It was the identity you've been carrying. The version of yourself you've been being without even realizing it was never aligned with the version of reality you've been trying so hard to create. This can be hard to accept at first, because it feels like life has been unfair or stacked against you. But when you really look closer, you begin to see that there's a pattern, a kind of invisible script you've been following. It's not about effort. It's not about trying harder. It's not about finding the perfect timing or the perfect words. It's about realizing that the version of you who keeps checking for results, who doubts in silence, who feels the need to prove something, is also the version that's still operating from a self-concept that says, I don't have it yet. And as long as that's the identity you're living from, reality keeps reflecting it right back. Not because life is cruel, but because it's incredibly precise. See, manifestation doesn't begin when the result shows up. It doesn't even begin when you say the affirmation or write the desire. It begins the moment you see yourself differently. It begins the second you stop identifying with the version of you that's still waiting and start stepping into the version of you that already is. It's a subtle shift, but it's everything. Because the version of you who already has it doesn't question whether it's coming. That version isn't checking for signs, isn't comparing, isn't in a state of lack. That version walks, talks, and feels like it's already done. And the universe, which doesn't respond to words but to vibration, mirrors that back in the form of people, opportunities, timing, and yes, even the manifestation itself. So if you've been doing everything but still feel stuck, maybe it's time to stop asking, why isn't it here yet? And start asking, who am I being right now? Because everything changes the moment you stop trying to change your circumstances and start changing the image you hold of yourself. The moment you upgrade your self-concept is the same moment your reality begins to shift in ways that feel almost magical. But it's not magic, it's alignment. Most people think self-concept is just a handful of thoughts or ideas they occasionally have about themselves. They might assume it's just about confidence, or just about being positive, or maybe something they need to think about when they're feeling low. But self-concept runs much deeper than that. It's not just what you think about yourself in a single moment. It's the steady, automatic identity you carry all the time. It's the internal story that plays in the background without you even noticing. It shows up in your expectations, your assumptions, your emotional reactions, and even the way you explain things that happen in your life. It's the part of you that silently says, this is just who I am, even if you never say those words out loud. It's the reason why, in some areas, things feel effortless and automatic. Maybe it's easy to make friends, or maybe you're great at solving problems quickly, or you always seem to figure things out at the last minute. That ease isn't luck, it's alignment. It's happening because your self-concept in that area is strong. You don't doubt yourself there. You're not wondering if you're worthy of it. You just live from a place that assumes it's natural. That's what makes it easy. But if there's another part of life that feels like constant resistance, where things feel out of reach, where progress feels slow, where you can't figure out why the same problems keep showing up, chances are there's a conflicting identity buried deep in that area. Maybe it's something like, I'm not the kind of person who gets chosen, or I always have to work twice as hard just to get half as far. These aren't just passing thoughts. These are beliefs that sit at the root of how life shows up. And what's even more powerful to realize is that self-concept isn't just built from your own thoughts. It's shaped by years of experiences, feedback, reactions from others, childhood memories, and past disappointments. Over time, the mind gathers evidence to support a certain version of you, and then that version becomes your normal. But just because it's been your normal doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Identity is not fixed. The real magic begins when you stop trying to manipulate the outside and start shifting the inside. When you start saying, this version of me might have felt true in the past, but I'm not available for that story anymore. You don't have to force a new identity. You just have to decide which one you're done living in. And once you do that, once you begin to feel into a new version of yourself, one that feels powerful, supported, abundant, and worthy, the outside begins to reflect that shift. Not because you hustled or pushed, but because you finally became the version of you who already has the life you were trying to chase. That's where everything changes. That's when alignment becomes natural. The funny thing is, this isn't some new idea you have to force yourself to believe. You've already lived it. You've already seen your self-concept play out in real life. Think about it. There's probably at least one area where things just seem to work for you without much effort. Maybe every time you need something small, it shows up right away. Maybe whenever you're in a pinch, someone helps out just in time. Or maybe you've always found it easy to keep a certain rhythm in your life, like getting just enough money, even when things look uncertain. You might have brushed it off as luck or coincidence, but the truth is, those things show up again and again because at some deeper level, you expect them to. There's an inner belief, something like, it always works out, somehow, or "I know I'll figure it out," that quietly lives inside you and keeps attracting those results. Now look at the flip side. Think about the things that feel hard, the patterns that repeat no matter what you try. Maybe it's like you're always being overlooked, or like relationships always get complicated, or money feels tight even when you're doing everything you can. Maybe no matter how early you start, you still end up running late, or you're always just missing out on opportunities. Those aren't random either. They're not just bad luck. They're connected to stories that have lived inside you for a long time. Stories that sound like, "I always get passed over," or "It's just harder for people like me," or "Nothing ever goes fully right." Even if you don't say those things out loud, they live inside you, and they show up in the way life unfolds around you. This is how powerful self-concept is. It doesn't wait for you to notice it. It's already working, already shaping your experience, already showing up in your results. It's been doing that for years, and when you realize this, it becomes a turning point. Because instead of feeling like life is something you have to chase or control, you start to understand that it's something you can align with. The real work isn't fixing the world. It's shifting the way you see yourself in relation to the world. When you know, without needing proof, that you are someone things work out for, the world begins to adjust around you. You've already manifested based on your old self-concept. The same mechanism that brought you those familiar results can bring you completely new ones, but it needs a new story to work with. You don't have to fake confidence or pretend you have it all figured out. You just have to lean into a new identity, one belief at a time. And once that belief becomes natural, once that new self-imposed feels like your new normal, life will rise to meet it, because it always does. One of the hardest things to accept, but also the most liberating, is that your life is not just randomly happening. It's not being shaped by luck, chance, or what other people decide for you. It's being shaped by your self-concept, every single day, whether you're aware of it or not. The results you see in your relationships, your finances, your career, your health, they're all following the pattern of how you see yourself and how you expect the world to treat you. And this isn't about blaming yourself or feeling guilty for where you are. It's about waking up to the fact that the power has always been inside of you, even when you didn't know it. When you carry a self-concept that says, "Things never work out for me," then the world seems to cooperate with that belief. Delays, disappointments, and closed doors become your default experience, not because you're cursed, but because that's what your energy expects. The same thing happens if you've been walking around with the identity of someone who always gets just enough to survive, but never more than that. You might get opportunities, but they slip away. You might try something new, but it doesn't stick. It feels like life is playing games, but really, it's just following the instructions you've written into your identity. But the reverse is also true, and this is where everything begins to change. When your self-concept starts to say, "I always find a way," or "I am someone who things naturally work out for," then the world begins to mirror that back, often in ways that feel sudden or magical. People show up out of nowhere, situations unfold perfectly, and things fall into place, not because of luck, but because your energy has shifted. You're not just reacting to the world anymore, you're leading it, through the image you carry of yourself. That's why it's not about forcing anything outside of you to change. You don't need to chase people, fight for attention, or constantly try to prove your worth. You don't need to send out 100 resumes or convince someone to pick you. The real work is internal. It's about recognizing the identity you've been living in and asking yourself if it still matches the life you want. If it doesn't, you don't have to panic. You just have to shift your focus and start aligning with a different version of you, the one who already has what you've been seeking. It's not about being fake or pretending. It's about allowing yourself to believe that you're not stuck, that you're not broken, and that nothing is truly out of reach. Your reality will always echo your self-concept, because that's the root. And once you understand that, you realize that changing your life isn't about doing more, it's about being different from the inside. And the moment that shift happens, your external world will start to catch up. Everything you want, whether it's love, money, peace, freedom, or success, already exists. It's not out of reach. It's not hiding. It's not waiting for you to become more deserving. What it's actually waiting for is your alignment. Not alignment with the desire itself, but alignment with a version of you who already lives in that reality. That version doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't wonder when it's coming. That version simply exists in the state of it already being done. And once you begin to see yourself through that lens, life starts to organize itself around that new self-pose. This is where the idea of self-concept becomes more than just something to understand. It becomes something to live. When you shift within, the world has no choice but to follow. That's not just a nice phrase. It's how creation works. You don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you are. And what you are is another way of saying how you see yourself. So if you've been stuck in cycles that feel frustrating, or if it feels like some parts of your life are great while others just won't move, it's not about working harder to fix the broken parts. It's about looking at where you still see yourself through an old lens. Maybe the version of you who always has to struggle, or the one who's always left behind, or the one who believes life works for others but not for you. These identities may feel familiar, but they're not the truth of who you are. They're just stories that got repeated so many times, they turned into beliefs. The good news is, beliefs can be rewritten, stories can change, and when they do, so does everything around you. When you start identifying with the version of you who already feels loved, already feels supported, already feels abundant, your actions start to reflect that. Your body language shifts, the way you speak, the energy you give off, the choices you make. All of it begins to come from that new version of self. And the people around you respond to that, the opportunities match it, the timing lines up. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. This is the real work, not grinding in the outer world but becoming deliberate with your inner world. Not forcing change but becoming the change. You're not here to prove your worth. You're here to remember it. You're not here to chase after life. You're here to allow it to mirror back who you've chosen to be. So if something hasn't shown up yet, it doesn't mean it's not coming. It just means you're still becoming the version of you who naturally receives it. And once you do, it won't be a surprise. It'll feel inevitable. Because manifestation doesn't begin when the desire arrives. It begins the moment you decide to stop living as the version of you who doesn't have it, and start showing up as the one who already does. Let me know in the comments, what's one old identity or self-concept you're done carrying? The version of you that's always waiting, always chasing, always doubting. What story are you finally ready to let go of? And who are you ready to become instead?